Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Our next session was a surprise addition to the schedule. We had to make some changes due to Hurricane Fiona knocking out power to our formally scheduled speakers. They are safe, but we're sorry that speakers Zulma Olivares Vega and Yolanda Arroyo Pizarro couldn't join us for this event. You can look for them soon as guests on my Divorcing Religion podcast. For now, I am just delighted that my friend and mentor, Dr. Marlene Winell, could join us today for a fireside chat about religious trauma and some of the harms of purity culture indoctrination. Dr. Winell is a pioneer in the field of religious trauma. Her book, Leaving the Fold, A Guide for Former Fundamentalists and Others Leaving Their Religion, has helped thousands of people, including me, understand my own religious trauma syndrome. Dr. Winell's organization, Journey Free, provides support and resources for those recovering from religious trauma. Welcome, Marlene. I'm so glad you could come and talk with me today.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
I was admiring your hairdo when you first came on before, and you told me it's your Emma Thompson look. Wonderful. And I had seen her recently in a movie, and you and I had chatted just briefly about that. Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, it was called. And I thought it was a really interesting and charming way to look at differences in age with sexuality, and also had that her character having come out of a very conservative sexual background.
Yeah, it was a good movie, and the subject of sex and aging is actually rather neglected, I think. I used to teach a class in gerontology and adult development when I was in Pennsylvania, and one of the things I would ask the students, I said, imagine for a second that you see a couple lying on the side of in the grass on a hillside, making out, and they're being very sexual. And let me ask you, when you see that picture, this couple making out, lying on the ground like that, how old are they? And if I told you they were 70 years old, how would you react?
That is a great question. What were their reactions?
Oh, well, they all thought it was a young couple, and they hadn't thought about that. Hadn't really thought about that. And there are all sorts of ageist jokes around about aging and sex, and how much it doesn't happen or falls apart or isn't any good. So anyway, I'm really glad that movie was made. I think that was a good movie for that subject.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, for me, as I'm getting older, I'm in my 50s now, I find the greater acceptance and knowledge I have about myself and my own body, the greater my pleasure, my ability to receive pleasure as I'm able to just fully relax and be present. And I'm not worried about, do I look like this or do I sound like this? I can just be myself. And as you know, I've just married someone who is over 20 years my senior. So there is quite a difference in our ages. And I'm delighted to say that, well, people in their 70s are getting it. Things are alive and well, and people can, they can still look forward to that. You're still a sexual being as you age, and if you get to know yourself and your partner really well, it can just be such a pleasurable experience.
Yeah, definitely.
In fact, you introduced us, so I am grateful to you for that. Oh, would you talk to us a little bit about your own growing up and how, I know you were in a missionary family, what messages were given to you around sex and around your own body changing and things to expect and what was appropriate and acceptable, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I grew up in the Assemblies of God Church, which is conservative, evangelical, Pentecostal, and sex was really not discussed much at all back then. In my house, it was just an unmentionable. So the implication along the way, of course, was that it was a bad thing to get near at all until you're married, right? There's no premarital sex. But we didn't really discuss much of anything, except there was so much silence, so much lack of language, that it was just up to us as kids to figure it out. And then supposedly when we got married, it was all supposed to be wonderful and perfect. And as we know, that's not necessarily the case with everyone. I remember thinking that sex was bad, and yet as a teenager and young adult, being very horny and not knowing what to do with those feelings, and going on dates, and then especially when I had a steady boyfriend, feeling like we were going too far, you know, and that one of these days we were going to accidentally go all the way. Remember those phrases? They're really weird.
Yes.
But we used to. It's sort of funny to think back and think about some of the deals we made. You know, like we agreed to keep it above the waist.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yes, I remember making deals like that. Yeah,
making deals, and then overstepping, and then having terrible guilt and prayers and praying about it together, and then recommitting ourselves. Maybe even above the waist was too much. You know, we could never figure out what was too much, and except that we needed to get married. So I got married young. I got married when I was 20, and that's really, really common. Yeah. In conservative Christian circles, and not just Christian, but other religions too, to get married young.
Better to marry than to burn with lust.
Yeah. So that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of young people really aren't prepared for marriage.
Oh, that's the truth.
So yeah, I went through my first marriage. I've been married a couple times, but yeah, it was pretty hot and heavy and guilty at the time.
Yes, it's terrible. So, I mean, the guilt creeps in there, and any, potential pleasure that you may actually be experiencing is completely invalidated and mitigated by this whole guilt. Now I have to feel guilty that I've done this thing that I wasn't supposed to do.
Yeah, it's too bad. And so one of the things that I talk to clients about is the idea that sex is natural. All the animals are doing it. Look around, look around at the rest of nature. Look around at animals, insects, dragonflies going by in pairs. It's everywhere. It's erotic. Nature is erotic. And it's life itself, really, because we are wired to survive and reproduce. That's what we're wired to do, right? And so if you get used to the idea that it's a natural thing and not just something that you're allowed to do after you're married and that has all these restrictions on it, then it can be a very pleasurable thing, and you can see the eroticism of life all around. I brought along, actually, I do photography, and I brought along a picture that I took. Can you see this?
No.
No.
But what is it? Is it fruit? What is it?
Oh, it's too bad you can't see it. It's a honeydew melon.
Oh, okay.
It looks really suspicious. I wonder why.
It does. It does look kind of suspicious.
Yeah, a suspicious-looking honeydew melon. When I cut open the melon, I just went, "Oh my God!" and went and grabbed my camera.
I remember being told that gay sex, homosexuality, was an abomination. And those are pretty serious words. And then I was very surprised to find out that actually in nature, there are a lot of animal species that do indulge and enjoy and use gay sex as just part of their behavior. Oh, we got a message that if you take off the blur feature background, we could probably view your picture if you wanted to show that to us. But you don't have to.
I'll see if I can do that. Might be too much trouble for me to. Oh, wait. Okay.
Looks like a genius lives there. Oh, now that is a suggestive piece of fruit. I love it. That is really something. Wow. So you were shocked when you cut into that, and that's what you saw.
And then I thought, yeah, it's time to get my camera. But as far as gay sex, scientists are finding out that most animals engage in homosexual gay behavior, and the sexuality. The thing about it is, it's not just intercourse. It's everything about physical interaction and affection. Bonobos are famous for using sensual behavior to manage relationships when there's been a conflict. To use affection and touching and sexuality to repair conflicts, breaches in relationship.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's very sweet. And then of course chimpanzees fuck all day long, and we're related to them. We're primates too.
That's true.
We're primates too. I think it took me a long time. It took me years, and I was well into my second marriage before I learned how varied and how multiple and how rich all the variations of sex can be, and that there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that you can experiment with. People have differences as far as what turns them on, what they enjoy. There's a lot of literature now, of course. There's a lot of erotic literature, but it can be quite the discovery process. And to go from being taught that sex is wrong, and I just have a little list. These assumptions, these ideas that we were taught. The flesh is evil. Flesh in general. I mean, that's pretty sad, right? That masturbation is wrong. Now that's a weird one, isn't it? Because it happens so easily and naturally, and yet to be told as a small child when you're finding out about it that you're doing something wrong. That sexual response before marriage is wrong. In purity culture, you're supposed to just turn off any kind of sexual desire, really. Train yourself to not respond properly, and then sometimes you can have problems responding when the situation is fine after marriage.
Right.
That guilt is good, and also other sexual orientations are wrong. So those assumptions need to be addressed and rejected, and then develop the new assumptions that you're going to have about sex, that our bodies are amazing and beautiful, that there's a huge variety. There is no stereotype that is the only kind of beauty, that masturbation is natural and good. There's lots of research on masturbation. It's good for you. It reduces stress. It changes the chemicals in your body and can relax you and help you. It's actually a healthy thing to do. So to learn about the whole range, the whole variety of sexual response, and to indulge in as much as you can, to find out about yourself, find out what is pleasurable for you. And another thing is to think about it as pleasure, not as seeking the big O. You're not just trying to have intercourse and have orgasms. Okay? If you forget about that and think about pleasure and giving pleasure, receiving pleasure, then it can be a whole lot of things. It can be exchanging a massage, it could be exchanging a face caress. So some things are so erotic if you let them be. And just let yourself be in the moment and feel what you feel. With couples that I've worked with, I've had them just do a hand massage, take turns massaging the other person's hand, to the point where it was so erotic they were embarrassed to do it in front of me, you know?
Right. Just a hand massage. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a whole world, and there are plenty of resources to find out about it. There are also books about sexual healing. The one I recommend is called Sexual Healing by Barbara Kiesling. And it's not just for sexual dysfunction, but also to acquaint yourself with sexuality and with your own bodily response, because your physiological response to sexual stimulation is your parasympathetic nervous system. You have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. Your sympathetic is when you're taking action, you're moving muscles, you're doing things, and you have some control. Parasympathetic is when your body is recuperating and relaxing and doing things like digesting your food. And your sexual response is in that category. In other words, you can't tell your penis to get hard or your pussy to get wet. You don't order yourself around sexually.
Right.
What you do instead is learn how to relax.
Right. And then if some people have shame around that, when their body is responding to different things that are going on, and then they drape themselves in shame and feel like, this shouldn't be turning me on. Though that can also inhibit, of course, our ability to feel pleasure.
Yeah, and that's a trauma response, right? A trauma response is when your body, your brain confuses past with present, and you're remembering past experiences, even if they are simply things that you were told, ideas, but you're remembering that, and you're taking that into account, and you're having a fear response out of self-preservation. You know, you're not doing anything wrong. This is really important. You're not doing anything wrong when you feel nervous or afraid when sexuality comes up. If that's what you've been taught, then of course you're going to respond that way. You should respond that way, because you should be taking care of yourself. And so your brain is trying to protect you, right? When you have this, what can be called triggering or emotional flashbacks or anything like that, you're simply trying to protect yourself. So that's when you engage in some of the interventions that you can engage in to interrupt that trauma response.
Right, to ground ourselves.
Grounding and being in the present and so forth, so that you know that you're okay, you're safe, and breathe, let your body relax, and do things that are also very natural.
We have a comment that someone has shared, and this person says, we're kind of taught that sex is pretty much a wifely job. And I feel like that is a message that has been promoted over and over again through media and just a lot of movies and things like that. And so women can take that on themselves, and men can grow up mistakenly thinking, yes, that's right, her job is to satisfy me. So that there's so many things that we're taught that are just untrue and unhealthy, and we don't have to be okay with them. We are to question those things.
Definitely. No, it's not a wifely job. Hopefully you can develop a trusting relationship with your partner to where it's both people that are trying to bring pleasure to each other and to the relationship.
Boy, this is we do have another comment that's just come in, and I think maybe you're familiar with this. Today in Mormon circles, there's this thing called soaking that young couples will do. The guy will insert his penis into the girl's vagina and not move. It's a way to get as close to having sex without it technically counting. Wow. It's such a ripoff because the people are being denied pleasure. They're denying themselves pleasure. They've been so steeped in the shame aspect of things, and they're really missing out on getting to know themselves and experiencing the pleasure that's available.
Yeah, there's this taboo against having actual intercourse, which is, defined as, in particular, putting your penis in the vagina and having intercourse. And then that's the terrible thing. Then, for some reason, lots of other things are okay. But it's crazy because people do things like anal sex as if that's okay.
Right. Yeah. And they're unprepared and they don't know what they're doing, or people aren't aware that, they can get STIs different ways. Yeah. So we're really doing a disservice by not teaching accurate and adequate sex ed in every school. I mean, if kids aren't getting it at home, they should at least be getting it as part of their education to protect themselves.
Yeah, and you can get pregnant without actual intercourse too, if you're fooling around close enough. And the semen is able to get inside. There are funny things that happen.
Yes.
And right, there's just not enough information. And you and I had a little talk recently about children and letting them know what's going on with sex and sexuality and teaching them attitudes that are healthy and actual information and answering their questions. I know that sometimes people that have had a religious background and then left it and they're secular now, but then they get confused in questions of parenting. What do I tell my kids? Because I was told nothing, or I was told all these bad things. And so I think it's important to treat the whole subject as a very natural thing, part of, to talk about everything and at an early age and just the most natural terms as possible and answer questions. I think I was telling you that my granddaughter was confused about, how does he get it in there? And so I explained about lubrication and she just went, wow, and it was a pretty normal, natural conversation to have. And I felt like she deserved to know.
Yes.
And there are many other things that kids can ask. And so I just, I think that's the approach that makes sense.
So really
provide books, provide literature.
Yes.
Don't treat it like it's a dark, dirty secret.
Right. And letting them know that questions are acceptable and appropriate. They're not going to be shamed for asking a question. And even if they ask us a question and we feel ourselves blushing, and we may even have to say, I'm not sure about that, but let me find the answer for you, or, here's how we'll find the answer. The important thing is that the child or the young person knows that they can come to you with the question, and they're not going to be shamed for it. Because as you say, sex is natural. There's not much that's more natural than sex in every species.
Mm-hmm. And wanting pleasure is natural too. That's another whole subject, right? Where especially Protestant work ethic kinds of people, we think that life is something to be accomplished, and we have things to do, and we're busy. And back when we were religious, it was about saving souls and keeping your nose clean until you get to the next life, and that's when you're going to have pleasure, after you get to heaven. Mm-hmm. And this life is serious and it's work. Well, maybe that can just be turned on its head. Maybe this life is the life that we're meant to enjoy.
Yes. Wow. That's a difference in thinking. That's for sure. We have a comment in our chat. The church absolutely doesn't want accurate sex education. That destroys the control/shame bind that keeps the members of the congregation from waking up to reality. That is so true. Yeah, boy, oh boy. That I just all I learned in church around sex was that it's doesn't happen before marriage. And then you wait, and then you'll just be blessed on your wedding night. It'll be this perfect, blessed union. But I mean, how can it be if both people are virgins virgins? I mean, if both people have never indulged and they've never had sex, they don't know their own body or plumbing. They don't know the other person's body. They don't know what pleases each other. It can be very anxiety inducing, and doesn't feel really good a lot of times. And that's a big disappointment for people who've been promised that the wedding night was going to be a blissful event.
There's something about sexual sinning that is important. It is important to understand. You know how in religious circles, sexual sin is considered like the worst kind of sin. Mm-hmm. And people have tried to figure out, why is that? Right. Why are religious people so obsessed with sex? Right? Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've found out with working with clients is that, especially around masturbation, and this is for men and women, where if sexual behavior is considered sinful and this big terrible sin, and then you engage in it, like you masturbate, it's not as if you can just confess your sin as something that you did, you're sorry, you're not going to do it again, be forgiven, and go on with your life. What happens is that it gets, it becomes larger than that. It becomes, you are a sinner. Because you have these sexual thoughts and you've done these sexual things, that makes you a bad person. So it goes beyond the actual sex and goes into corroding the person's sense of self, of being even at the basis level a decent person. Mm-hmm. So it's crippling, and more so than some other kind of sin that you might be able to just pray to God and get forgiven for, or go to your priest and get forgiven for. It goes to your actual sense of being a decent person, a person worthy of being a follower of God's, a follower of Christ. And so it's pretty devastating. And then, if this goes on for years, as an adolescent, a young adult, if you keep on feeling terrible about yourself as a person, every time you have a sexual thought or every time you masturbate, then over a period of time, your sense of self is deeply damaged. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think it is a very big deal. It's a very big deal to be teaching somebody that sex is wrong, because it's going to have that kind of impact.
Oh, yes. And when I think of some of the men who have grown up steeped in purity culture, and their authorities came down so hard on them, that they must never masturbate, that it's a sin, any sexual thoughts is a sin. And they were trying so hard to be good and to be righteous that there over time can become like this disconnect between them and their bodily pleasure. They had to work so hard to turn it off. Right. And then it can be confusing or very difficult to get things going again.
Right, yeah. Right. To be aroused. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there can be some performance issues, mm-hmm. right? Not just guilt. I mean, guilt is one thing, but even when you don't feel guilty, to have trouble with the actual sexual engagement and being able to perform. Mm-hmm. That can be a big issue. Mm-hmm. So that's why some of these healing exercises are helpful and good, because like in the book I mentioned, to go through some steps, take some baby steps, learning how to relax, learning how to feel different parts of your body, learning how to exchange pleasure in some small, simple ways, in ways that feel safe, and then build on that and find out that that you're okay. Your body's not damaged.
Mm-hmm.
You're okay. Maybe some of the feelings around it need some healing, but your body is still a fully functional human being.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, and in other ways we heal. When we heal from trauma, we bounce back. We have an immense amount of natural ability to heal ourselves and grow and come forth with who we are, sexually and otherwise, despite all sorts of negative influences. It's really amazing and quite inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And, when we were talking just a minute ago, it was reminding me that, so perhaps some of us were in situations where we were manipulated, coerced, taken advantage of, or assaulted. And then there's a morality around sex that we have ingested. So it's, now I'm not a virgin, I'm not pure, whatever the words are, because this happened to me. And then that can be become such a heavy burden, on top of the fact that already a violent act was perpetrated against us, or we were coerced. We didn't know, it wasn't what we wanted. It wasn't the situation that we expected walking into things. And now we add shame on top of this very sad and distressing thing that's happened.
Yeah, there can be a lot of healing needed from that in order to move forward. And but it does happen. The healing can happen, and it's good to be patient with yourself. Remember that you're an animal as well. You have every right, just like the rest of the animal kingdom, to have pleasure and sexual pleasure in this life, and to remind yourself of that. As in other areas of religious recovery, I think it is useful to write down what are the main ideas that you want to hold, what are the values, what are the beliefs that you have now about it, and write them down, post them somewhere where you can see them, so that you can remember. And when you do have a reaction, a feeling of guilt and shame, to stop action, to do the freeze frame. In my book, I talk about doing a freeze frame when you're having a reaction to something and your idea monster is saying all this stuff to you, that it's important to stop everything, to listen to what you're getting from your past, and to put a hold on it, to say to your idea monster, to that voice, okay, thank you for trying to protect me. However, that's your opinion. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually going to take a different approach to this now. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And then repeat the ideas, repeat the new attitudes and ideas that you've learned. Yes. They bear repetition, and realize that the old ideas have been repeated thousands of times. Think about that. You have these neural pathways in your brain that are well worn in a rut. And mm-hmm. so you need to do the same amount of repeating of the new ideas in order to have a more, to have the new ideas come to you more easily and not have to work so hard. Mm-hmm. And it does get easier. It gets easier and easier as you realize, no, I don't believe that anymore. This is where I'm at now. Yes. And then pairing that, of course, with the physiological part where you learn to breathe and you learn to be grounded in the present, and not panic. The changes occur over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Being compassionate for ourselves, as it takes time for us to kind of grow into some of these new ideas and values that we have, almost shifting from a belief-oriented to a values-oriented worldview and way of being, is something I think a lot of people can relate to when they leave religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Somebody has commented in here, I remember my mom telling me that sexual sin was the worst sin, as if there's categories, but we've all been told things like that, I think, at some point from religious relatives. How were you different with your children when you were raising them?
Oh, just much more relaxed, much more open. Sex was always okay topic. You still have to talk about. You could talk about it at the dinner table if you wanted to. It didn't matter. It was just, a natural part of life. It's like talking about food or clothing or, it's a need. It's a normal thing.
Yes.
And we need touch too, and self-love. Masturbation can be treated like self-love, because we all need touching and loving, and it's a form of that, and that can be totally fine. With my kids, I had to explain to them that it was a private thing,
mm-hmm.
That if you're in the bathroom and
mm-hmm.
Shut the door.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please. Same goes for your bedroom.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because kids are very natural about it if you don't interfere.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. They're curious. They're curious. So if we can always meet their curiosity with warmth, that's so much the better. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I had an interesting. It just reminded me. One time when my daughter was a teenager, we were in the car driving, and I said, "What do you think what are the rules that you think you have about sex? Like, what have you learned from me or anyone else? What do you think the main rules are for having a sex life?" And she just responded right away and said, be safe, don't do anything you don't want to do, and have fun.
Wow. Way to go. That was excellent.
I said, really? Yep. And I felt really good about that.
Yeah, boy. If I had to do it over again, those were some of the things, those would be the things I'd be teaching my daughters for sure. That's so beautiful. We have just a few minutes left. If anybody has questions they'd like to submit, now's your opportunity.
So there is one thing I like to mention that often gets left out, and that is people have a notion of good sex. Like, what is good sex? Like, they've something out of the movies,
right?
And what it's supposed to be like, with great foreplay, and then this and that and the other, and to have good sex. I read something one time that totally challenged that and said, no, sex is all over the place. Sex can be lots of things. Let's give it a few names. How about cathedral sex? Cathedral sex is when it's all spiritual. You set the tone, you dim the lights, you play the music, you get something, you take a shower and put something sexy on, you take a long time saying sweet things to each other, and maybe having some chocolate ice cream or whatever, and then you finally have sex. It takes a long time and it's all so beautiful, and that's cathedral sex. Well, okay, maybe that's one form, right? But aren't there some other forms? Like, what about rough and tumble sex? What if you and your partner are downtown and you're in a dark alley and you want to do sex up against a wall with the chance of being caught?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it only takes a few minutes, but that was sex too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or old shoe sex. This was one. Old shoe sex is when you're already in bed, you're really tired with your partner, you've had a long day, and you go through the motions that are so familiar,
Yes.
but it feels so good and it's so nice, and then you fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, old shoe sex. How about sex in the morning when you're both ready for work and you're almost out the door and one of them gets an urge and you have to strip all your clothes off again and have a quickie while you get in the car for work? You know, it can be so many different things. And so don't try to make your sex fit a mold, fit a pattern. And that can free you up to where, you know, one day it's one thing, one day it's another thing, but let it be varied like that. And some days can feel great and other days not so great, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, to all of it. We do have a comment. I was coached too soon to go out and get a vibrator, and I ended up totally disconnecting from my bottom half of my body and going completely numb because of religious shame. And I self-harmed and was committed for a month just at the suggestion of getting a vibrator and because of sexual shame from religion. So yes, take this journey slow. And it is such an individual journey, and we do all need to be aware of our own comfort level. Just because someone else is making a suggestion that we try something, that might not be for us. They're speaking from their own experience. So yeah, I think being aware of our own needs and wants and going from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good response.
Mm-hmm. And I sometimes have folks tell me they were so programmed that they don't even know what they do like they don't even know what's their favorite color, something basic like that. Mm-hmm. You can do something so simple as just going to a thrift store or a department store and just looking down the rack and thinking, do I like this? Mm-hmm. Does this appeal to me? Does this appeal to me? Just giving ourselves opportunities with no pressure to connect with our likes and dislikes. That can be a simple, non-threatening way to start learning about ourselves.
Yeah, and notice the things that turn you on. Different things turn people on in different ways, you know. And I remember when I was in relationship with somebody, and I asked him, you know, to wear a hat, like a fedora, you know, and he said, "Oh, I'm not really much of a hat person." I said, "It's not for you."
I love it. That's right. So did he get it?
Yeah. And how about some suspenders? Yeah. Whatever. And then, you know, in turn, I'm willing to wear something or do something that, but not just asking each other for things, but take notice of the things that put you in the mood, okay? And be responsible. The way I put it is be responsible for your own arousal. Mm-hmm. You know, don't expect, like especially if you've been programmed to think that sex is bad or wrong, or you haven't had any in a long time, or you've had all these obstacles, then you need to learn what turns you on and then create those situations. Like if you're married and you're doing laundry and you're wearing sweatsuits and the kids are crying and dinner is not ready, you know, you're not going to feel sexy, right? And if you have arranged a date night and you've got a babysitter, then do the things that will help you. You know, that usually there's a transition time between your everyday normal activities and feeling sexual and getting into a sexual mode. Take your time, take a shower, have a massage, do whatever it is that puts you in the mood. Don't expect it to just hit you over the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And we are taking responsibility for ourselves, and we also can ask our partner if we're curious. Do you like cologne or perfume?
Exactly.
Tell me. Let me into your world. I want to know what turns you on so that I can participate in a way that's pleasing to you. And we need to be open to having these conversations. This has been such a joy, Marlene. Thank you so much for just joining with me and having a chat like this. And I encourage people to visit journeyfree.org, and they can find out more about what goes on with you, and also about the retreat that you have coming up in December. You've got that information
Retreat
on the
in
site.
December. And I want to mention the support group. There's a support group ongoing that has conference calls, and it has some subgroups on different subjects. One of them is sexuality, and we have documents, readings there, conversations, a forum. One of the documents is a checklist of a couple hundred sexual activities, and you can mark off yes, no, maybe so, I'll try it, and share that with your partner. It's something to learn about.
That's great. Well, okay, journeyfree.org, everyone. Okay, and so we are at the end of this session now, and we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back with our next exciting session. See you in 15 minutes.